This is our monthly Ash office hours. We actually skipped last month because of ElixirConf 2024. It was a really good time. Yeah, so essentially what this is we're going to give you a little bit of an update on our, kind of what the team's working on. And we're going to talk about, we're going to answer any questions you have and talk about sort of what's new with Ash Framework. And I'm also going to try to figure out why this chat looks like crap. It's very bigly, and I don't know why. And if anybody is familiar, they understand that I don't know what I'm doing with this stuff. See, scale filtering, is that a thing? Nope. Transform, nope. All right, this is something I should have figured out before starting this stream, but you live and you learn. All right, chat's just going to be big and stupid in the corner there. That's what this video will look like. I'll fix it for the next one. Okay, so what have I been working on? I'll start. Well, first, I'll tell you what, let's just do a quick introduction for anybody who isn't familiar with the core team. My name is Zach Daniel. I'm the author originally of Ash Framework, so you may know me. And I'll let Barnabas, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Barnabas. I'm from Austria. Joined the core team, I think, like a bit more than a year ago. I've been using Ash in production for the last 2 years and looking forward to using it more.
Awesome. All right, now that somebody other than me has spoken, let's confirm, maybe if chat can confirm that Barnabas's introduction came through loud and clear, because it's going from Austria to North Carolina to wherever YouTube is. A lot of room for something to go wrong. I guess I could check it myself. Other than me has spoken, let's confirm, maybe if chat
Using it more.
Yep. Okay, cool. We're good. Awesome. Alrighty. James, go ahead.
Yo. So hi, I'm James Harton, also member of the core team, obviously. I am based in New Zealand and work for Alembic along with Zach. And yeah, recently I've been mostly doing client work, but I've added a couple of nice little features to Reactor recently, and so I'm quite pleased about that I'm still making progress.
Cool. So I got some message here that it's a little bit broken up. Is that true for both James and Barnabas? Was it just one of them? We got to get it figured out before we can really dive into the content, because we don't want people listening to robot noise. Here, I guess I'll.
Oh yeah, it's probably on my end.
So I'm quite pleased about that I'm still making progress.
So
for both.
Should be better now. I think I was still connected through the VPN.
Okay. Yeah, we'll go ahead. Just let us know, chat, if there's any problems. You might hear my dogs in the background. Such is life. Okay, so maybe Barnabas will be a little bit better, like you mentioned, switching off the VPN. Okay, cool. So diving in a little bit more to what we're working on. So my time these last 2 months or so, aside from support and bug fixing and small improvements that were necessary along the way, has been dedicated to Igniter and the installers for the various packages, for the various Ash packages. And so we've made a lot of progress, and I would say all the big packages with big setup steps, with the exception of Ash authentication, is done, which is very nice. And
I'm sorry for making your life so difficult by making such a complicated DSL.
It had to happen. It had to happen. It's quite good because, well, what's the right way to phrase this? The domain you were solving for is incredibly complex, and I think that the fact that I can translate that into a sort of middle ground with code generators is quite nice. So it's been going very well in general. So I actually do have, so the core Ash Authentication installer and Ash Authentication Phoenix installers are done. What is missing now is installers for auth strategies, like password strategies. So we have password, Google, Magic Link, or adding add-ons like confirmation and that sort of thing. And I would like to have at least a few of those done. I may not do them all. Like some of them may still be follow this guide to set them up, but I think that we want the really common ones to have a nice little onboarding path. Cool. And before I transition to the rest of the stuff, I'm going to share before I transition to the rest of the team, I'm going to share our contributor of the month. So Barnabas is, while also on the core team, he is also our contributor of the month. Now, there's something very cool. Oh, this probably looks weird. It's like my video is sitting on top of that. Let me fix that. There you go. There you go. It sits on top of James right now. Here, we'll put it up here. All right. So there's a really cool feature coming for Ash GraphQL. It's taken a lot of polish to get just right, and it's in a really good state from what I've seen. There's still some review that needs to happen, right? But it's really powerful, and I think it will also be the basis for doing this kind of thing in other settings. So what he's been working on is subscriptions for Ash GraphQL, which is sort of like automatically updating live feeds over GraphQL, like leveraging your resources. It's really super awesome. And I will, I'll congratulate Barnabas on the Contributor of the Month award and transition over to him if he wants to talk a little bit about what he's working on.
Yeah, thanks. Nice surprise. So most of the stuff is done. A bit of documentation is still missing, and like there's still a couple of things that could be done better, but I think it will be able to merge it probably sometime next week, and then it's gonna be like a beta state first. You have to opt in, and then people can try it, and we can polish it a little bit more before making it like a stable feature in Ash GraphQL. So yeah, pretty cool. It's been almost a year since I started working on it, but yeah, life got in the way a couple of times and work. But yeah, happy to finally have it in a state where it can be released soon.
Also a really big feature, so I'm not surprised it took you a year.
There was a lot of design iteration, like back and forth conversations about how to actually do it right.
And also, like, I think one of the features they introduced into AppSynth is something like that was like half a year after I started it, and we are using that now. So yeah, a couple of things that had to come together to make it work.
Very nice. Very, very nice. And I think, it's important also for other people to kind of hear this, like that are interested in contributing to Ash or even just other open source ecosystems, right? Like it's a marathon, not a sprint with these sorts of things. And like, we're a group of people who are contributing time, our own personal time, maybe time from our companies, right? But our companies also need our time to, help make the money and all these sorts of things, right? Like it's all our time is often very spoken for. And so you can contribute, you can hop on board, you can start something, you can try something out, you can start a conversation, you can make a small PR. There's no like expectation that, this person who's decided they want to help work on the framework is now, you have to work, such an amount of time a week, or else we're not going to, you're not going to be sort of seen as part of the team or anything like that. And we have people, this happens very regularly, where people will get really busy with work and they won't be, they won't have a chance to work on their thing for a couple months, and then they'll come back and they'll round it off. They'll make it nice. And it's a very fluid type of work. So if you have some ideas, or if you're interested in contributing, like, don't see it as like you have to be in or out, like you can poke around, you can make some changes, make some PRs, see where it goes. James, what's up?
Whoa. Okay. So it's been 2 months since we last talked, so I've been trying to think about what's on the changelog. So I have been using more Reactor and Anger since we added the Ash Reactor extension, and ran across a couple of things that were missing. One of them was that sometimes I just want the reactor to fail, so now we have a flunk step, so we can bail out if we need to. The other is I've recently went through and added the ability to modify the action context in the Ash Reactor steps because I needed that for something. And it's, I'm trying to follow Zach's philosophy of don't build the whole thing until someone actually needs it. So we're building what we need as we go. So that's pretty exciting anyway, being able to add features to Reactor, even though I'm basically full-time on client work at the moment.
Cool. And speaking of client work, maybe this is something both of you might have an answer to, but if there's any sort of interesting usages of Ash that maybe you've had, I know I'm putting you on the spot. We don't prepare for this meeting, by the way. Like we fully wing this every single time. But if there's any interesting or sort of Ash related things you've been working on that you might want to share. For example, I can give one, so you guys have time to think. But we were working on something that I've been doing for one of our customers is working on a sort of replacement of like this pool of resources. I got to be vague because it's customer information, right? This pool of resources that was using a gen server to share this pool of resources and switching that over to be something that works with the data model and is backed by an Ash resource that represents one of these available resources, and you can request a new one and you can check. And it's been really nice for me because I don't often get to do this, where I really sit down and like use my tools that I've been working on. And it came together really nicely. And I think it was a good application of a lot of like various parts of Ash. Like a lot of, I had to use identities, custom constraints, and generic actions, and all these different things. And it was rewarding to see that all sort of come together. Okay, so chat real quick before I move on to you guys. Chat looks like garbage because you can't even view a full question in this format. So I'm going to remove this for now. And I'm just going to read questions that come up in chat instead of trying to share it over the wire here. Okay. Cool. So before I go into this question, though, if either of you guys has anything interesting to share on that front of how you've been using Ash or something you've done interesting with it, feel free. You can say no.
Yeah, so I've been just polishing some stuff lately because I'm actually transitioning out of my current role at my current company. So just like doing some handoff and stuff like that. So no really new interesting stuff for me.
Yeah, maybe that's something we'll talk a little bit more about at our next office hours, or I don't know if you want to share any details about that this time around.
No, let's do it next one.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to hear what's next, what's going on. James.
I have been abusing calculations for fun and profit, especially using them in policies and expression policies has been kind of wild and eye-opening to be able to write, rather than having quite a complicated policy, be able to write it as like an exists expression, with complicated ands and ors and things in it, and then just call it from the policy with a nice name. And also be able to, a lot of them are things like this particular client has a tree of locations, and users have permissions to do things in locations, but they can do things in locations that are children of the location that their permission is in. So you have to walk up the ancestor tree to find if they have a permission. So the calculations are a little complicated in there, but it has been super great to be able to just say, like location dot ancestors dot related to user ? And then pass in the actor as an argument to the calculation, and it's been great, really great.
That's very cool. I do remember that gnarly manual relationship that we wrote to do ancestor and children location type stuff.
Yeah, they're still there.
Yeah.
It's because it's a recursive CTE, so there's no other way to do it.
Yep. Although I do think so. Jonathan actually wrote recently added L-tree support for Ash Postgres, like native built into Ash Postgres. And I think, you're not going to go refactor the way your, location hierarchy works, but that is, I think, how I would be doing it in the future, especially given that it has native support. We can start adding native support for like functions, like ancestor child functions, in Ash Postgres directly, which would be very nice as well. So yeah, I think if you're doing work with sort of tree structures and Postgres, L-tree is really nice, and Ash now has a nice L-tree type with some utilities around it. Cool. All right. So we've got our first question, and hey, I'm going to remind everybody watching, like this. Once we move into the question and answer phase, it ends when you stop giving us good questions to answer, right? So this would be as long as short as you guys want it to be. So you have to bring the questions, otherwise we're going to bail. Let's go ahead and start with zero skill, just luck. That's a very good description of me as well. Is asking or is saying, I've looked at the GitHub issues marked with good first issue, but Ash code looks very completely different to different code to the Elixir code that I normally write, that it's very hard to get started. And yeah, so that's absolutely true. That's something that we hear a lot. Like the Ash is a sort of framework on top of like your sort of vanilla Phoenix or Elixir app. And the main thing about getting started is I don't think it's really reasonable to dive in and contribute to Ash without building something, even if it's like just some toy stuff, but you have to build some stuff with it and kind of internalize some of the philosophy, because the what we see pretty consistently is eventually you break through a wall where you get it, like where there's the patterns that are actually backing Ash are not very complicated. They can look complicated, especially if you're not used to working that way. But in reality, it's a relatively simple concept of we define a data structure. That's our resource or our domain or all these different, those tools that we build. And we pass that off to a function to like interpret that data structure, which is a pretty standard way of doing all sorts of things. But the form factor can often look confusing. So the real point here is when you start to build something with Ash, especially something that starts to have some, multiple features, multiple tools, you start to grow it a little bit. You start to see like that is when I think it starts to click. And I think that also kind of highlights why everybody that's on our core team has built something significant, either for a customer of theirs or for the company that they worked at, or in the case of Robert Graff, like he's doing his own thing. He's building his own startup, right? And he's using Ash all the time to build. Robert Graff is on the core team, to clarify. And so I think that's one of the things. It's just you have to build some stuff, and you have to stub your toes a couple times and then understand why these things work the way that they do. And then you can start contributing ultimately. And look, we have a lot of work left to do to make it, super easy for people to contribute.
Yes. I also want to go on the record and say, like, there should be no shade here for zero skill, just luck, because what Zach considers a good first issue and what anyone else considers a good first issue are probably quite different.
Yeah, look, there is a bit of a problem here, and the problem here is I have a philosophy that I apply pretty rigorously to Ash and the things that I work on, which is if it would take me less than 5 minutes, I just do it. I don't think about it. I don't debate whether or not it's worth doing, or well, I mean, I debate if it should, if I know that it should happen, right? And I can do it in 5 minutes, then I just do it. And what that means is a lot of, like, when I say good first issue on those GitHub issues, what I'm really referring to is that you may not need to learn about all of how Ash works. Like some features, you have to juggle the complex interrelationships between 3 or 4 different systems to actually, do them. So yes, there are probably some issues marked as good first issue that are not easy. Like that's the thing. To me, good first issue doesn't mean easy. Maybe it should. Maybe I should redefine my definition of good first issue. But all the easy stuff gets done really quickly, and all that we're left with is the stuff that takes more than 5 minutes. Takes me more than 5 minutes. So,
You'll also note that a lot of the core team's contributions aren't actually in the core; they're mostly in the periphery of Ash. Adding extra features on the outside.
yeah. I mean that's the thing. The core is like it is where it's the nexus point of all of these different things. And yeah, so it's working on core can often be a juggling act of like, how are all of these features used? What impacts is this going to have on the rest of the things that actually use it? Which, in a way it's like, I don't know. We're getting into like the sort of metaphysics of programming here, right? But,
yeah.
But people often want to, they have a fight to reduce coupling, and often I think can go too far in the direction of like sprawl, and where like reality is what couples 2 systems together, not necessarily like what your code looks like. So like if you've got a simple example is if you've got like some model somewhere, like a database table, you got a database table that has a non-nullable column in it, right? And then you've got something in your application that can write to it, right? It shouldn't like allow somebody to provide like a null value for that, right? And then likewise, you've got an API endpoint that ultimately will call to this thing in your application that will ultimately write to a database table, and that API endpoint should express to the outside world, well, hey, that thing, you must provide that thing, especially if it's a public API, right? And the reality is what couples those 3 things together. The fact that they all have to express the same concept that this piece of data is required, or otherwise you're going to have bugs or bad UX or whatever it is it's reality that does that. And so we try to take that in stride, which is we let those things that are coupled by reality be coupled, and then we make extensions for the rest, and we try to keep them from being we try to keep those things as uncoupled or even fully unrelated as possible. And it works reasonably well, but it does mean that core is the representation of all of the things that everything cares about. That's what lives in core.
Yeah, and I guess to follow on from that, what I might have been getting at is that if you're having trouble finding issues, you want to contribute, you want to fix some issues, maybe have a look at some of the packages around the periphery rather than Ash core. Like if you're using Ash GraphQL, have a look at some of those issues, or any of the other packages, because they tend to have less concerns in them that you have to reason about in order to be effective.
That's a really good point, and it kind of went over my head when you were originally made it. So no, but that's a really good point, and I think that is really good to keep in mind.
Yeah.
Okay, Jason asks, how is the Ash book coming along? Is it out yet? So it's not out yet. I will give a little bit of a status update. We've reached an internal milestone, which is great. We're working with our editors. We're actually beginning a sort of review process, which, to be clear, that does not happen when the book is done. That happens like halfway through potentially, right? Anyway, the important bit is we're making very real progress on it. There's going to be other people who have the book, or at least have what we've gotten so far, soon. So it's very exciting. And no, that's not the beta. That's important to keep in mind. A lot of people the beta goes to a lot of people, but this is going to be a very small group of people. But yeah, we're making really good progress, and progress is going to speed up quite considerably once I'm done with the Ash authentication igniter stuff, because I've been sidetracked from being able to work on my part of the book for that. Because we need the Ash authentication igniters for the book. That's part of it. So, yeah. Alrighty. Do we have any more questions? We've only gotten one or two. I guess something that I can do actually that would be a little bit of fun is I can show you guys some stuff. Let me get it set up here. Let's see, how do I do this? All right, here's what I'm gonna do. I will give you a little demo of the Igniter stuff that we've got going on for Ash authentication. Let me make my code real big. Let me put my face off to the side here, make it smaller. All right. So what we're going to do is I am going to first get rid of an example that I used before. Okay. So we're going to use mix-igniter. Actually, I'm going to mixarchive.install. I'm going to get the latest version here to make sure there's no problems. All right. So I can use mix-igniter.new. I'm going to make an app called foobar, and I want it to be used with mixphoenix.new. And I've got a fun question to answer when I'm done with this demo. And I'm going to generate it with phoenix.new, and I also am going to install Ash. So this is some of the new Magic Igniter tooling that we've been working on. It's working quite well. Let me fix my video location. There we go. So let's go ahead and install it. I'll say, no, you don't need to install dependencies. And there's some output here that you can kind of ignore because we're wrapping phoenix.new. It's not too important right now. And this does take a little second, we cue the elevator music. Come on. I can show you a fun thing. Look, a basic default Phoenix install currently generates a warning, which is pretty interesting. And we can fix that real easily using Igniter. Alrighty, come on. Surprised this doesn't normally take this long. Maybe it's my internet because I was downloading dependencies. Maybe. Okay. So we've got our new project, and actually I'm going to swap my editor for this one. Gonna move this here. Okay. So first off, you can see if I compile this, I'm going to get a warning about, if we look at the get text, about using import foobarweb.getText. In specifically, it wants you to change this code here, and you can read about getText changelog for this. There we go. So we get this little warning. So Igniter ships update getText with a getText update task that can make this change for us automatically. So we lock it to the newest version that has this thing. It will change this getText to use getText.backend, and it'll change our code here to honor the new version. So this was super easy for us to adopt. So I say, yeah, we can proceed with these changes. And now if I compile, I don't get any more compiler warnings. So that's fun. So I've got Ash installed, but let's say I want to install Ash Postgres. So here we can see we're going to do some compilation, and we're just going to say, hey, should I install this dependency? We'll say, yeah, go for it. It's going to build that. It fetched it from Hex, and it's going to build the dependency for us automatically. And it's going to ask us a question like, hey, what's the minimum Postgres version that you'll be using? This was actually, so Rebecca Lee, co-author on the book, pointed out that we were assuming in a default installation that it was 16.0, which is like, well, what if you're using an older one? So now we ask. And so I'm just going to accept the default. Something Igniter could use is like some loading state indicators, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, so now we set up, I'm just going to go up through the changes, but we've set up some aliases. We modify the Ecto repo that comes with Phoenix to be an Ash Postgres repo. We set some configuration, like this is to disable async in your tests. We modify some formatting code and the .format.exs. And so, yeah, we can go ahead and proceed with these changes. And it's going to run this task as well. The following task we run after the changes are made. Cool.
I got a quick question.
Yes.
So Igniter is pretty aware of the code that already exists, right? So
Yes.
could we use it to maybe do some code mods when upgrading between versions? If
Yeah,
there are like
absolutely.
breaking changes?
So the next major version of Ash will have an automatic updater that will apply ideally 100% of the changes that need to be made using an Igniter script. So yeah, that's the goal. Absolutely. Cool. So now I want to install Ash Authentication, and I'm gonna install Ash Authentication Phoenix because that will install Ash Authentication for me. But I'm going to say I need to use my local. Actually, what I need to do, just because I'm working on it, this is not something you will need to do, but I am going to set up. I can't see my keyboard and find my mic. All right. I am going to use my local one. That's not how that works. Override. For Ash Authentication and Ash Authentication Phoenix, because I'm working on these packages locally, so I need to do that. Next steps.get. Okay, so now I can say mix-igniter.install Ash Authentication Phoenix. And you can actually see what it's going to do here. It's going to prompt me to make a change to the version because it's going to look up and see what the latest one is. And it's going to see that I already have that dependency installed. And I'm going to say, no, actually, you can stick with the one that I have. So now this is going to say, hey, we couldn't find the accounts module. So that's something that we could set with -- accounts. But the other reason this could happen is because you haven't yet run the Ash Authentication installer. So I can say, yes, go ahead and run the installer. And okay, it says we want to install bcrypt Elixir, which actually should only happen if you use the password strategy.
We need to change that dependency.
Yep.
Also should offer the Argon 2 strategy as well.
It's a good idea. Uh-oh. That's going to bite me here in a second. I need to do... Also making changes to Ash for this, and I'm going to have to restart this installer. Lame. Again, this is only because I'm giving you a local demo. This is not steps that would be required. You get a nice little script. But yeah, the way this all works, the packages sort of build on top of each other, and so I have to work on multiple packages at a time to get it all ready to go, and then I ship the packages one at a time, in dependency order, basically. Come on. Cool. So I'm going to say, don't replace my dependency. And I'm going to say, yeah, you can run the installer for Ash Authentication. And then this installer wants to add authorization rules. And so for that, we need to select a SAT solver. And you can see here it says, if on Windows, use simple SAT, otherwise use picosat Elixir. So I'll use picosat Elixir. And it's hey, we got to add that to your dependencies. So we'll add that, we'll install it. This is only recompiling because it's a local dependency for me. You don't need to worry about that. Actually, it's installing because picosat, Ash has an optional dependency on picosat. That's why that's installing. That would install even if it wasn't local. All right. And the reason we compile these apps is because the apps, like if you were just modifying the mix.x's file, we could just do that. We wouldn't need to actually compile anything. We wouldn't need to like rebuild. But the reason that we do this way is because the apps themselves contain their own installers. So we compile them so that we can run those installers. And so here you can see is the process of setting up Ash Authentication and Ash Authentication Phoenix. You can see we've modified like this. There's a lot of work that's gone into this. It's pretty cool stuff. But we modify your router so that we can like extend. We add this scope, this base scope, to add the authentication routes. We add places, stubs for where you can put your live views to be, if you have a user required or optional or no user, like maybe, if you're signed in, you shouldn't be able to see the sign in page or something. We modify your browser and API pipelines to include the plugs that they need. We bring in the helpers that we need for that. And we create a live user auth. This is what powers that live user optional, required, and live no user. We create what's called an auth controller. So this handles successful and failure authentication so that you can do things like redirect to your homepage or show a flash message. We create secrets files. We add the SciText extension. We use this for case insensitive attributes for like the email, that sort of thing. We add a supervisor to your supervision tree, and then we generate the actual resources, right? So this is the user resource. It's got actions. It's all configured. It's got policies. We generate this is a lot of code. We generate the token resource that has also the attributes required. It has the JTI, the subject, when it expires, all this sort of information. And it has a bunch of useful actions that you can do. You can see this is the new, if you've used Ash Authentication before, this is what's new in the way that you install it. Instead of having a bunch of actions like in a hidden way added to your resource, instead you're actually getting, we generate it all into the resource so that you can see exactly what's been made available to your application, right? So you can see like, okay, there's a tool to expunge, the expired tokens. I need to remove that. Let me write this down. Remove the module name from the description. Anyway, we have all these nice actions and it has all the right, extensions, etc. We create the accounts domain. We configure everything. We configure your runtime, your production, your test environment. We do a lot of work. We even install a Igniter extension so that it can tell you where Phoenix files belong in your project directory. So there's a lot of stuff. And I think that what's important here is like, this is stuff that we want to cut a middle ground between code generation and a library. And I think this is the right middle ground where the library, if you look at like these actions, for example, on the token resource, we're still in charge of like how to fetch a token. Ash Authentication provides the implementation for what that looks like. But you can still see this. We generate the shell of it and you can tap into it by adding your own preparations, right? So this is, I think, actually something I've not really seen done well in really any other scenario, is this nice mix of code generation and library code, and it's upgradable. So if Ash Authentication comes out with a next major release and we need to make a modification to the get token action, like we can provide a script that will migrate your get token action. Maybe we change it. It's like, oh, we don't take a JTI anymore. We only take a token, right? It will have a script to help you upgrade that will remove the JTI argument from that action. And so this sort of thing it only works because the structures we work with the structures are well structured, right? They're data, not arbitrary code. And so we can do things like go find the argument and erase it, etc. So that's a little demo of what's going on with Igniter. We're actually quite close. If I accept these changes, it's going to set up my app. And I can actually show you this now that I think about it. The very basics of the next piece of work that's going to be the sort of final piece in this picture when it gets to it. So you've got your application installed, you've got Ash Authentication installed, and yeah, you get some instructions, right? Like we can't patch JavaScript files at the moment. So I have to go to my Tailwind and I have to say, okay. And there is a bug with the Tailwind stuff, I think, that I have to figure out, but not important. So now I can say, actually, I'll tell you what, while we're here, let's just show you what this actually looks like. Assuming I didn't break anything horrendously. Run the migrations for our repo. Okay. So now I can go to /sign in with an underscore, whatever. I don't know what the default is. Okay, sign in with a dash. And you've got, oops, you see there's nothing here at the moment. And the CSS, there's a bug with the CSS right now that I have to figure out. It's not important. But now I can close this and I can say mix ash authentication .patch .add strategy password. All right. So this is adding some structure. This doesn't do everything that we need yet. It's not done, but I'm going to accept it and I'm going to do the rest manually. So if I go to my user resource, so what I need to do is I need to say password I have to double check my own docs here. xdocs.pm/authentication, not hash authentication Phoenix. Password. I want the getting started with password stuff. Where is that? Oh, I think this is just.
Does the password patcher let you choose between let you override the identity field? So whether it's an email or a username or a phone number or whatever.
Yes. Yeah, you can say
Awesome.
-- identity field username.
Yeah, nice.
For example. It's still relatively limited because I'm just working on it, now. But all right,
yeah, no, that's cool.
Here we go. So I can add this right here. Okay, so now mix ash.cogen, add password strategy. So this is going to generate our migrations. Is this under? I think it's under strategies, isn't it? Cool. So we're going to run CodeGen. So you can see this generated the migrations required for that. It's going to add email to our database table, a hashed password. It's going to create a unique index, all that sort of stuff. So mix ash.migrate. And again, the CSS for this is messed up, but it's not important. So I can say need an account, give it a password. I can sign in. And you can't see this, but I am signed in, right? Like I haven't added anything here that would show you, but I've logged into the application. Oops. And I can go and I can sign out as well. And so when I fix the CSS, this will be much, much prettier. But this is like an automatically generated authentication shell from the strategies that are supported in your application. If I added social, it would have like a Google. If I added like Google, it would have a Google button, sign in with Google button. If I had Magic Link, it would be like, put in your email, we'll send you a magic link, all that sort of stuff, right? Automatically. So that took this is still in a prototype phase, these generators. And that took I did it live on stream. I was not prepared for a demo. I just winged it. So this is like a really, I think, next level in terms of developer experience for getting started with these things, but also developer experience for extending these things. So later when you're like, I want to add magic link, and you're like, okay, well, I can just go back to my add strategy. This doesn't work now, but I'll just say, I want magic link, right? That'll be the whole entire way to add magic link to your Ash application. And that's, I think, pretty unheard of. So very excited about that. I'm going to go ahead and get back to our video sharing here. Where's the X button?
I'm looking forward to being able to generate, I'd love to work on a feature that lets us generate the live view code into like lets you eject a live view, because we have a lot of people
Mhm.
who like there's a big gap between what I can get for free and what I want the
Yeah.
app to look like.
Yeah, I think that's going to be huge. Like the providing, a shell for, or like generating a shell, even if it doesn't have, like, it doesn't have to do everything. It just has to give you a
No.
reasonable starting point,
Yeah.
Yeah, I also agree. That's very exciting. Okay, so we do have a question in stream, in chat. It says, I have a question. How can I convince my team to bin our Django 4 spaghetti code base and replace it with Ash? I was like, wait, should I read this out loud? Because like it's going to get somebody in trouble here. No. Multiple Ember.js front ends for good measure. Yeah, I mean, look, it's a good question. Like the actual adoption curve for Ash is something I do think about, which is like, how do we get people to migrate off of, other tools, etc. Like ultimately, here's the thing where I've landed at it, right? Because people ask me this question a lot in sort of different ways. They say, I want to migrate to Ash. How do I do it? And how do I migrate my current app to Ash? And the first question is always, why do you want to migrate your app to Ash? Okay, good. So I'm not getting you in trouble. Zero Skill Just Luck says that he tells him directly that he's not a fan of the code base. So ultimately, you have to identify the motivators for migrating, right? People have asked me, like, they want to migrate to Ash because they think it's cool, they want to learn it, they, et cetera. And I'm like, that's not a good enough reason, right? Like, you can build things with Ash if you want to learn it, but that's not a good enough reason to migrate like a money-making product, to another technology. So that's not to say there isn't a good reason. You just have to be able to articulate it. You have to identify it. And a lot of times what that means is is a lack of confidence that they're going to be able to implement the next feature that they need to implement in a reasonable time, or a lack of, visibility into how their application actually works, or a lack of consistency, which means that it's very slow going to go from one part of their application to another because they have to like rebuild a whole new paradigm for how this works because they did it differently over here and differently over there, right? So there are good reasons, but my first piece of advice is, if you want to actually, make technology changes, is you have to articulate well the thing that you're going away from, and then you can position something better as an alternative, right? You can say, here's how we can offset these problems and the various benefits that we're going to get. And if you're talking about convincing a team, this is the same value. You're pitching them on Python to Elixir. Elixir, that's a lot easier to sell, honestly. Pitch them on Elixir before you pitch them on Ash, right? Ash is just the icing on the cake of being able to use Elixir, in my opinion, right? Like I would use Elixir even if Ash didn't exist. I did use Elixir for many years without Ash. So that's what I would say. Pitch them on Elixir, and there's lots of great material out there on benefits of Elixir and on benefits of Elixir, on cost reduction, on efficiency, on all these sorts of things. So you can find a lot of good case studies there.
Yeah. The other thing I would warn is that if your team is able to make low quality code in another framework, they can also do it in Ash if they try hard enough. Like, it also requires some discipline.
Yeah.
And that's probably the thing you need to pitch them on more than necessarily changing stacks.
Yes. So Jason is asking a question saying, Ash Postgres generate migrations, sometimes generate migration codes for models that had already been migrated as if it's ignoring the snapshot. I believe Zach had a plan to. So I actually have no recollection of whatever this is you're talking about. I think there may be, okay, I have a vague recollection of there was a thing that the migration generator did that was like harmless, like it generated like a modify statement to modify an individual column or something. I forget what it was, right? But I think maybe I made for that one particular choice, for that one particular problem, the choice to like put that on the back burner because there's no like tangible problem. Like you can just go, edit the migrations. But if there's more things like that, or if you're seeing like a lot of unnecessary code generated into migrations, we'll fix that. That's just a bug. And it's possible maybe that's fallen out of my brain, or it's, I don't know, something, but yeah, just open an issue or comment on that issue if it's been sitting for a while, and we'll adjust it, because the migration generator really shouldn't generate like bogus or unnecessary changes. I did fix something recently actually that may be the bug you're talking about now that I think about it. It had to do with modifying attributes that did not have a foreign key. So like they to then have a belongs to foreign key, and what was produced was just a modify attribute, like I say, modify the attribute to the same type it already is. And I fixed that. Now it'll properly modify it and add the foreign key constraint. So, maybe that's the thing that looked like it was ignoring snapshots. Zero Skill Just Lux says, I'm talking about a huge code base. The amount of technology and workarounds that we were throwing at our Python code base to keep it running and performing is blowing my mind. Yeah, look, I actually do. I think it's, I was doing Python before Elixir, and the experience that I had, it's like Python's, I don't know. I liked it a lot at the time. I thought I was pretty good at it, and we had to build this big ETL, tool to, shovel a lot of data from one place to another. And the Python thing crashed like clockwork on Friday nights at 6 p.m. when I wanted to be like, out drinking. I lived in Chicago. I was a young person. I'm like, let's go, and I'd go put my jacket on to leave the office, and then they'd be like, it's down again. And I'd just sit back down and I'd say, well, I guess I'm not having any fun tonight. And the truth is, yeah, it just wasn't easy to operate. It wasn't easy to keep it operational. It wasn't easy to be defensive in the code that I was writing. And so we rewrote it in Elixir. So again, I had many years of experience, or at least, I don't know, multiple years of experience in Python. And I learned Elixir and rewrote the ETL service in 2 months. Myself and a couple other people, it wasn't just me. But we all had like the Elixir cheat sheet page like bookmarked because we didn't even know like the basic syntax of the language. But we had heard basic principles like, use gen servers to isolate crashes and supervisors to manage restarts. And we used these basic building blocks provided by the language. And I'm not lying when I tell you that thing like never crashed. It sometimes would experience like degraded performance. But it was like we could fix it in the morning. Like it was fine. It would keep running. It would keep syncing data, but maybe one table wouldn't be up to date, right? Or something along those lines. And I was sold from that minute on. It was actual. I don't ever want to get paged in the middle of the night because my app's not running. And generally speaking, that does not happen to me with Elixir apps. It basically never happens. If it happens because my infrastructure provider has a problem. Not because my Elixir app has a problem. My hosting service has killed my app somehow, and like that might happen. But my Elixir apps just chug along, and to me that's invaluable. So pitch them on that is what I would say, because that is a real experience that most people who move services from other languages into Elixir have.
Yeah, it's true.
All right, folks, we're nearing out the hour. Do we have any more questions or anything anybody wants to bring up before we call it quits? James, Barnabas, you guys have anything? No? All right, we'll give you 3 minutes to get your questions in before it's over. We're just going to sit in awkward silence until that happens. Hey, Jeffrey, thanks for joining. We'll see you next time. All right. These sound like goodbyes, so I think we're good to go. Yeah, we'll see you all around this time. Actually, yeah, around this time next month. Keep in mind the timing and the scheduling of this changes.
I just remembered. I'm gonna be in Berlin on the 14th and 15th at Codebeam Europe. Cool. So if anyone's gonna be there, say hi.
All right, you heard it from the horse's mouth. Say hi to Barnabas in Berlin. All right, folks, we're signing off. I think that's a good time to call it. Thanks for joining, everybody. You guys have a good weekend. Wait, it's Wednesday. Have a good rest of your week and then weekend. All right.
It's Thursday.